Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farooq Patafi. Once again, we are going to talk about politics of Pakistan. On one side, of course, Maulana Fazlur Rahman is en route. He is coming to Islamabad, as was announced earlier. What exactly is going to happen? How exactly is it going to pan out? We are going to discuss it today. And then there is the issue of media's conspiracy theories that continue all the time. We will try to do justice to all these matters and more. In order to help us understand these issues, we are joined by Dr. Niaz Mirza, a regular on this show, a political economist of renown and a columnist of renown as well. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Next to him is Arif Chaudhry Saab, a senior lawyer, a constitutional expert as well. Thank you very much, Chaudhry Saab, for being part of the program. Next to him is Senator Anwarul Haq Kakar Saab, Senator of Balochistan Awami Party. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Let me, with your permission, Dr. Niaz Mirza, let me start with Kakar Saab. Kakar Saab, how do you see, since you are part of the government alliance, tell us what is your understanding of why Maulana is coming to Islamabad?
I mean, as far as his intentions are concerned, I don't think so anyone is privy to what actually is going in his head, but all we have to rely is on their public statements and public positions which they have taken, either written or verbal. Apparently, they say that they want to agitate on the account of last year's election being unfair. And according to them, they were rigged. Now, let me remind your audience over here that the entire vote bank which they got in the whole process is between 2 to 3%. And this demands of the government should pack up and they should be shown an exit route.
All right.
And the Prime Minister should resign only comes from this 2 to 3% of vote bank political party.
Right.
Rest of the political parties, be they in opposition or otherwise allied parties, they are not coming up with any such sort of demand.
Right. Right.
So this is the demand prima facie of JUI.
Right. But here's another thing. Now that Maulana has left for Islamabad, the government has been in consultation and has been trying to actually diffuse the situation. There was dialogue going on. There are many who think that you started all of this very late in the game. Could have done it earlier. What do you have to say on that?
I mean, well, there might be different shades and opinion on the government's initiative and its timing also.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, government did the right thing. They engaged with them. They are talking to them. It's part of the political process. And it does not mean that government has succumbed to their pressure.
Right.
Talking doesn't mean that you have agreed to whatever they are saying.
No,
it's not just an agreement.
Of course. But the question
It's
is
just
not
engaging
about
them.
succumbing or not.
Yeah.
The question is, why did you delay it so much? Right?
Well, I think so that the things were building up, and then there was a situation, across the border over Kashmir, and the government's top priority since Prime Minister's speech in UNGA, it was more on the priority list was Kashmir and the situation, what was going on over there. The domestic politics probably followed that in the sequence.
Right.
So as it started approaching closely to the date, that's how probably the government also
That is
started
how
responding.
things usually happen in the Islamic Republic. Arif Chaudhry Saab, your take, sir. One aspect that worries everybody, that we are sitting in Islamabad. Whosoever wants to come and agitate can come and block, and disrupt life here. Why is our law silent on the matter?
Patafi Sahab, law is not silent.
Okay.
Nobody has a right to block public ways.
Yeah.
Nobody has a right to come to Islamabad and attack the government and topple the government. That is a war against the state because state is being represented by the government.
Okay.
And government is legitimately elected and political system is in play.
Right.
As far as the intentions, I would like to
Go back to the first question.
yeah.
Right. Please go ahead.
As a matter of fact, as I think, Maulana Fazlur Rahman has his own agenda. And his agenda is, everybody knows that, being out of power for him is like being nowhere, being like, he feels that he is dead. So from nonentity to something, he has to do this. And from the day one, once he lost, this was his stance. And he was more vocal, more vociferous on all these issues than any other political party. And plus, I think, it was fueled up by the statements on government side, saying him that, using language, I would call it intransigent attitude of, humiliation.
Certain ministers?
Yeah.
Okay. Regardless of that, sir, again, coming back to the law and
Yeah.
legal matters, why is it that so many people in the past, including the incumbents and other political parties as well, have been able to stage such dharnas in Islamabad without any repercussions?
No, they came with the permission of the government. If you're talking about last dharna of
Government, PTI did.
Yeah.
But what about Maulana Rizvi? Right?
Yeah, Maulana Rizvi,
TLP.
he was above law.
Okay.
Yeah, so law was, not for him.
Okay.
Actually, this is, a dilemma. If the state uses laws indiscriminately, without any discrimination, everybody should be considered to be equal in the eyes of law, before law, and he has to implement law, then I think these things cannot happen. Because right now, you don't have to allow anybody to come to Islamabad, because if somebody has some demand, and for that demand he wants to agitate, that is his right. But once you have a demand, and that is one point, a demand that the government should resign, the Prime Minister should resign, that's not the demand which is legally, entitles you to come to Islamabad and,
is,
attack the...
is it an illegal demand?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is illegal demand because, until and unless due process of law, which requires, either he should lose his majority in the House and through vote of no confidence.
No, but freedom of expression.
No,
is
freedom
not
of
a
expression, that is true. He can, anybody can demand whatever he wants. But I am talking about the demand which is substantiated in order to justify, a march.
And-
Because march,
And march being a show of power.
show
or
of power,
threat of power.
You're talking about long march, then long march was, back, if you're talking about long march, you can talk about long march of Mao Zedong or, any those people who really had something, in their mind. And now if you ask them, bring them on.
I hope we are not going to talk about Mao Zedong's cultural revolution here.
Yeah.
Let me bring in Dr. Niyaz Mirza, sir, your take. We have been discussing Maulana Fazlur Rahman's march for quite a bit.
Yeah.
But now it seems it is entering the final stage.
Yeah.
Do you think that there is going to be some kind of showdown?
Well, I mean, if you just take it sequentially, the easiest thing to do is to enunciate principle, and I think the principles are quite clear. There are genuine grievances against the government in terms of delivery and competence. There are genuine concerns about, the free fairness of the last elections.
Okay.
There is the fact that the PTI itself did a dharna. But none of those things, really justify a dharna which is coming here with the objective of toppling the government, as Chaudhary Saab said. So, that was the initial objective, aim that was being repeatedly said almost every day by the Maulana. And now, there is a sort of equivocation. Suddenly, he is no longer willing to, even state what his aims and strategies are going to be.
Right.
If he had come into an
Is
agreement.
Is it not the case from day one?
But no, he was very clear initially that we will lock down Islamabad and we will overthrow the government.
What were the principles he was fighting for? Initially, it started with Namus-e Risalat, right?
Yeah.
If you remember. Then all of a sudden, there was silence. And then, of course, it seems that there are, coming up with the ideas as they go along.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Initially, if you look at the aims, they were definitely against the principles. You know, you can't overthrow a government, whatever your grievance is, by the use of force, right? So if he had given up on those aims after coming into an agreement with the government, okay, look, you know, those aims are over, now we are just coming to express our demands and then we'll disperse, then it would have been a legitimate dharna. You could clearly say that. Now the issue is it's something in between gray area. He's not willing to say that he's coming to overthrow the government, but he's also not willing to say that he has given up on that aim.
Principle.
So, you know, that makes it, you know, more and more unclear, mysterious.
No, but as a pundit, I want you to actually tell us, is he in a position to extract something from the government right now?
I think it would depend on, you know, the number of people that he's able to bring into Islamabad after all the hurdles, you know, the containers, the fatigue of the people themselves. You know, there was a famous general who said, you know, if there are 500,000 people who move at the movement of your fingers, then you are just your own man. I don't need to take the name of the general.
Okay, you have to go there always, every time.
So-
but it was an issue of the
So
past,
it's the
right?
same thing. I think it depends on how many people he can bring in.
Kagar sir, what are you anticipating? How many people?
Well, that could be anybody's guess, but I think so.
No, your
they
government.
can.
Your guess must matter.
Well, I'm an ally of the government, but I'm not part of the executive.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't have access to the information which is the prerogative of the executive.
Right.
I, as a parliamentarian, am also observing my source of information is open source through media, through newspapers, and the rest.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying that I'm more or less like yourself.
Yeah.
So yes,
But
they can muster.
the
an-
executive is not briefing its own parliamentarians?
I don't think so. It's the job of the executive to brief its own
Take
parliamentarians
one
on these
party
issues.
into confidence?
No, well, I don't think so. It never happens. It has never happened in the past, and probably it is the prerogative of the certain line departments like Interior Ministry and the rest, who reports to the Prime Minister. Parliamentarian has got nothing to do with this dispensation of the executive's duties.
Yeah, but executive actually stems out of the parliament.
No, they do, but they do not report them on day-to-day basis. It's not.
Yeah, but,
It's not in the
considering-
rules of business.
No, I don't want to actually go into a very prolonged discussion into this, but the fact is that security and safety of everybody, including the lawmakers, might be at risk if somebody comes here and starts
Well,
actually.
I'm just responding again that there are issues which are brought into the House or to the standing committees. Through them, you do get certain briefings, but day to day, as far as briefings are concerned, parliamentarians are not given those briefings. It has never has been the practice.
Right.
So the rules of business doesn't say that you have to update the parliamentarians on the security situation in the country or other
Right.
situations.
I thought that since he is going to arrive here day after tomorrow, in a day or two.
Well,
right?
everyone
So
is
that becomes a-
vigilant about the whole situation and the environment. So I do have an opinion that maybe they muster a sizable number of people.
And they can stay here as well?
Well, that's as far as I understand, it is the contract between the district administration Islamabad and the
Right,
JUI
right. It is the local
that
government.
they have to a specific area has been nominated for them
Okay.
where they can come and register their protest and whatever they want to say within those parameters, and some certain sections and certain regulations that have been agreed upon both the parties.
Right. Kagar sir, here's another question. Particularly with a view to seeing how your PTI, your ally party, and your party actually perceive this. You have been, both the parties have been pretty media savvy, and now it seems that media is adamant of making it something which it might not be. Too much focus on Maulana's Mal, too much focus on hearsay. Is it true that somehow the government has lost, or the ruling coalition has lost the favor of the media?
Oh, well, always governments do not enjoy some ideal relationship with media, be it electronic or print. It has been the case in the past, and probably the present government is also going through that phase. We, in a transitional democracy, probably have not settled down on the parameters of the discourse, on the terms of reference of discourse. So that's why I think so. The stress of pull and push we always witness.
Right.
Once the institutional arrangement gets settled in the case of Pakistan as well, I think so such tensions would be minimum.
Can we identify any timeline? How
Well,
soon?
it is again anybody's guess, but,
Yeah,
all I can say that I can wish for it and we can contribute towards that direction.
Okay.
But media has to come up with its own sense of responsibility, and the government has to appreciate and value the
Right.
objective input of the media. Until and unless we do not do that, because as
Right. You have very clearly told me that you might not be in a position to tell us how many people will come to Islamabad and they are going
It
to
could
sit
be
here.
sizable.
Yeah, sizable is quite a sizable word, right? You don't know how sizable that is. Arash Chaudhry Sahab, what do you anticipate, sir?
Instead of starting with anticipation regarding how many people are going to be here, I would start with the Maulana's style of dharna and style of protest, if you allow me.
Yeah, please.
Because, always it happens that, first of all, you put your demands. Then give time that these are the demands, and then, please sort them out. And if you don't, then we give you a deadline. After that, we will start with this thing and that kind of protest. But it is a different case altogether. Here, demands will follow the dharna. First of all, whenever you ask them,
They're improvising, right?
yeah.
Okay.
I remember, in the very start, when it started discussions, on TV shows, I was sitting with some Maulana, and they asked, what are your demands? I said, Maulana Fazlur Rahman knows, whatever he says, those are our demands.
Right.
And today I was watching Maulana Fazlur Rahman, and I tried to read between the lines. He says that, it all depends upon, whatever happens.
Okay.
And now he has started talking about these kind of things that, people are suffering, and the young people, their promise has not been fulfilled, like, providing them jobs and, that kind of stuff. One thing I must tell, your audience, that people still, although they are not satisfied with the performance of the government for last 14 years, but still they are not ready to come on streets to protest to that level where the government changes, because, their voice is different. You will get a segment, I would call it, political parties will collaborate. They are going to cooperate with that, because what they want that they should not be blamed for all what is going to happen.
Right.
But their job should be done. Because as far as People's Party is concerned, or Noon is concerned, they both want to get rid of the government. But they don't want to come up, in the forefront,
okay.
that, people
Why?
will be questioning that.
Why?
There.
Why
Because,
don't they want to?
yeah, the reason is that they don't want to be questioned on this point that, you are talking about democracy, and now within 1 year, you have started, toppling the government, and the move to
And
topple
you
the
used
government.
to be the people who used to
Yeah, and
lecture
used to
us.
talk against these things.
Okay.
So that's why their prayers, their good wishes, and their cooperation is with Maulana. But they say, no, we don't want to, this kind of, we don't want to topple the government. But this is a somersault, I would call
I'm
it.
sort of glad that you actually forgot about the numbers issue and you talked about something very
number issue.
But let me ask you another very important thing. Regardless of how many people come to Islamabad, does it worry you that a religious political party is marching on Islamabad rather than a secular party?
Yes.
Because in Pakistan's politics, if you have thesis and entire thesis also gets its own stay in power. Yesterday's challengers are today's rulers. So the Maulana is going to be the next leader of the country?
Yeah. That's what we have been watching, since Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's times. Because, with secular slogans, you cannot attract that kind of mob which can do anything. Like, because with this kind of slogans, like, religious slogans, you can get those, I cannot use that word exactly, but I can, say that, the fanatics, those who don't, who are not open to any argument.
And but Chaudhry Sahab, what is the religious slogan now?
Religious slogan,
I mean, my Prime Minister
You
goes
will
to
see.
UNGA,
Yes,
and
whatever.
there very clearly he's talking in favor of for the rights of all the Muslims around the world. I mean, how can
as
a
far
Maulana
as there is no justification for any religious slogan. But does Maulana need any justification for anything?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Let me take it to Dr. Saab. Dr. Saab, Maulana,
Numbers?
you can talk about numbers, but of course, water under the bridge. Now, let us talk about Maulana and the fact that right now the challenger to the system is not a secular party, it is a religious party. Do you worry a country that has been recovering from a war on terror, that has been fighting terrorism for quite some time, once again religious narrative might actually gain currency?
Well, I mean, certainly it's not good for the image of the country. You know, we are trying to break away from the past and try to, you know, project this image globally that, you know, we are done with, you know, the extremism, the terrorism part, and, you know, we are moving towards moderation.
No,
And
Maulana-
already I see
Maulana
headings.
is not a terrorist.
He's
I
not
mean,
a terrorist, exactly. But, you know, for people who don't really understand the differences between the different shades of Islamists,
Right.
it's easy to forget that. And I've already seen headings in, you know, global media about, you know, Islamists marching towards Islamabad, and then, you know, mention to TTP and to Rizvi and so on, without making the distinction that
TTP
this,
and TLP and
that this Maulana is still very different. He's not, you know, a terrorist and extremist in that sense. But then, you know, of course, he's also expressed his intention to topple the government, and he's mixing religious narratives and rhetoric in between his other jalsas. So it's a toxic mix.
Okay.
And it's also, you know, quite sad that, you know, if the main objective is election, you know, then that demand should have been coming from PMLN, because
Right.
that was the biggest loser, right? They
Right.
lost power. But it's coming from, you know, a party which never has, and I still don't think that even
No, but-
after all this, I don't think it can become a national platform or a national political power.
Remember, there was a time when I used to pester you a lot, asking you, why do we keep on talking about parties from the past? Why can't we have new parties? And usually we ended up agreeing on the principle that we should have new parties, but we usually don't have it, right?
Well, it's, you know, new parties emerge when, you know, there's changes in society, new kind of, you know, forces emerge.
How much
which-
change do you want?
Well, you know, the economy is still the, you know, the same traditional economy, patronage driven economy, whether you're talking about the rural economy or the urban economy, low end goods, you know, family based businesses. So, you know, there's social media
No,
and all that, but the
it-
basic structure
if,
hasn't
If
changed.
you talk to Ijaz Shafiq Illani of Gallup, Pakistan, he says that there is a youth bulge, and the youth especially has its own businesses. That's
And
why
PTI represents that.
No. He was saying that there are other parties that might have actually scope for this. And if we allow the culture of political competition, new parties might emerge.
But yeah, it will take years. It will take years. It
How
won't
many
happen,
years?
say, before the next elections. I
Right.
think for the next elections, it will be still the same three or four, five, six parties. But, you know, change is slow in Pakistan because, you know, the structures of the economy are not changing. You know, social media and technology is changing quite fast.
Okay.
But the structures are the same. But, you know, I don't think, you know, Maulana is the future in any way.
Yeah.
And, you know, those kind of fears that, you know, a religious party will become so strong to become the main challenger to PTI in the next elections, I
No,
think
but
that's
the problem right now is that the world order is such a mess, and we are seeing very strange kind of combinations coming into power. That actually is a worrying thought, Kakar Saab, that anybody who is actually solely using a religious argument might be the challenger of the system, and we know that there is no limit to challenges. What do you say, sir?
I mean, to be honest with you, this is probably one of the worst times in terms of optics, what is happening here in this country. When we had RSS in our neighborhood and BJP on Hindutva's political rise, we don't want that we should be perceived as a nation or as a people who has been taken over by the
Fanatics?
well, I won't use
Religious
but
scholars.
by
fundamentalists.
a religious minority,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
They're
does
still a
it also
minority.
obfuscate our sacrifices? does it also cloud our sacrifices that we might have made in past 15, 20 years?
I would presume so, yes. And the reason for yes is because Maulana himself has stood with the mainstream politics.
Okay.
He has never sided with those terrorists. I would not accuse him of that because it would
He
be
came
very
under attack
unfair.
also, right?
He came under attack. There were people from his party who has lost their lives to those thugs, those terrorists, which we all hate together as a nation. But at the same time, the kind of rhetorics he's presenting, the kind of narrative he's trying to create and build, it is uncalled for.
Okay.
I mean, as you have said it in your own introduction, the UNGA speech of the Prime Minister, he spoke about blasphemy, he spoke about the Islamophobia, he spoke
rights.
about the oppression of different Muslim communities around the globe.
Right.
So he was emerging as an outspoken person within the Islamic world,
He still is.
equalizing the Turkish leadership, the Malaysian leadership, and other leadership in the Muslim world. So in a way, his stature was growing. He primarily denied domestic critiques of his also, who wanted to play a religious card. When once probably they saw that the opportunity is being lost, so they wanted to bring back relatively less informed, not uninformed, but less informed people who could be gathered on these slogans, and they could divert them and put their energies against the
Do you think
government.
that Maulana is going to receive some help from PMLN and People's Party as well?
Well, PMLN and PPP would be dying to help them a lot, but my own assessment is that they do have electoral strength, but they do not have the capacity to go for agitative politics.
Right.
And this is one of the reasons that they are relying on whatever Maulana is trying to muster.
Right.
And they are hoping, without even having a clear blueprint that how it's going to happen, that how this agitative politics of Maulana could be translated into the advantage of PPP and PMLN.
Do you think it is hypocritical that only 2 years, 4 years ago, they were complaining about this kind of politics and now they tolerate and actively support?
It's not hypocritical, it is rather, I think so, it's misleading people.
Okay.
They do understand the situation even then, and they do understand the situation even now.
Okay.
It is in their primitive interest to pick up their battles, to do their choose. They're not doing any politics of principle.
Right.
They're doing politics of survival. And for now, there is no other option with them other than relying on Maulana's agitative politics.
Right.
They don't have anything else in the cards.
Right. Arif Chaudhry Sahab, there's a reason why I was asking you about the law. If you remember, recently there was this mention that one Malaysia that was put together by Maulana Fazlur Rahman is banned or will be banned, right?
Yeah.
And then we saw a judgment that an organization that has not been, or observation, that an organization that has not been registered cannot be banned practically, right? So why don't we have that kind of clarity of laws? I mean, judiciary is doing, of course, that it is supposed to do. Lawmakers have to come up with the clear laws. We don't see that kind of clear laws, do we?
No, as far as laws are concerned, I think, there is clarity. Nobody can wage war against state, and nobody can, pick up arms to topple an elected government.
Batons are arms.
Arms,
A stick.
arms. What kind? Again,
This is what I'm
the
saying.
arms which
You have
can
to
harm,
define, right?
which can harm human body. Those are the arms.
Okay.
And because Maulana, if I just try to go on the side a little bit, Maulana is well aware of the situation that political history of this country, especially history of agitations in this country, has evidence that no movement was successful except that which was backed by religious slogans.
Okay.
So that's why he is trying to mix, the religion a religious slogan with, in his agitation. Otherwise,
Are you talking about PNA? Because apart from PNA, I don't remember any
no,
other
no,
religion.
PNA, basically, that if you remember, I was, used to watch that and was part of that, there were slogans.
Okay.
And mainly slogans, this was being
Religious slogans, right?
religious slogan.
But
where,
that was the only instance in this country's history when a religious movement, especially in the garb of a secular one, brought down a government. Otherwise, it never happens.
No, but if the government was ever brought down like this, that was through religious slogans.
Okay.
That's the only government which was brought down like this. Otherwise, the governments were toppled through 58 2B. That's a different story altogether. Yeah.
But here's the question. I read a U.S. Constitution. It is very clear. The Second Amendment and First Amendment are very clear. You have the right to bear arms. You have the right to form your militias, private militias as well. In Pakistan, I have always been under the impression that we didn't allow that. Our Constitution didn't. And then came National Action Plan.
Yeah.
Now, why is it that when I look at our law, I see gray area where there should be a clear definition of what violence is, what weapon is, right? What militia is. If it is not registered, should it be considered a militia if everybody is wearing the same uniform and behaving like a militia or not?
No, that is, I think Constitution has its own section, but that's not sufficient. I tend to agree with you to some extent that, Constitution is basically, it deals with broader issues on a broader perspectives. But as far as these things are concerned, you have to go, a legislation is silent. And you need legislation on all these issues.
Right.
Again, what kind of protest you can, lodge and how you can register your protest, And even so far, we have only 144.
Okay.
That
keeps on coming back.
Yeah.
Every time you impose, and then it is actually breached.
Yeah, it's, CRPC. So, and that is used everywhere. So, instead of 144, you should go in detail, and no parliament is finding time, to make for legislation except they have other agenda and other
No,
things.
now we
have a parliamentarian.
I mean, of course,
here.
he is not part of the executive, but
But
now
he
we
is
have-
part of the parliament.
Yeah, and I'm
that's
going
what
to come
we
back to
expect
him.
him.
But one question before I go elsewhere. You were talking about legislature, right, and its job. If it is about legislative business, can it be achieved through ordinances?
No.
Why not?
First of all,
Remember PPO?
but
Protection of
ordinance,
Pakistan
naturally, I tell you, because ordinance is not long-lasting legislation, and it
Yeah,
is
but
not
today
very.
it can solve
No,
the
it is
problem.
not respected legislation because, practically speaking, it is only when the parliament is not in session.
Okay.
But now, when parliament is session, almost parliament is in session, so you don't have to depend. These are the things you can say just ad hoc arrangement.
Right.
So government should not go on ad hoc arrangement.
Right.
If the government really believes in serious business of law, then there should be a long-lasting devices, long-lasting legislation, and let them bring before the house,
Right.
and let anybody oppose it, and let people know it.
Yeah.
Who is opposing this kind of legislation?
Yeah, but
which is meant
that might actually be good for optics, but it won't actually solve the problem that we are discussing, right, sir?
Yeah.
Let me go back to Dr. Niaz Mirza. Sir, there are laws, then there are ordinances, and then there is something called a duck test. That if it looks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, if it swims or walks like a duck, it is probably a duck. We are talking about the militia or the people who were giving Maulana Guard of Honor. They were uniformed. They had batons in their hands. Should we be perceiving it as a militia or not?
Well, I was looking at this judgment that came out today,
Yeah.
and I think the main point was that it's not even a separately registered organization. It's really, just an informal wing of the JEUI, so you cannot ban something which is not really registered. And then the other issue was about, whether they are armed. So, the prosecution raised the point that, they had sticks. So the explanation the defense gave was, those were sticks for the flags.
Okay.
So, you can get away with these kind of things. So,
No,
but
but
definitely there is a need for clarity
Yeah.
on, these kind of things. What is the definition of militia? When does it get under, the rubric of getting banned and so on? Definitely for a country so precariously positioned as Pakistan, which has suffered so much from, terrorism and violence, and, which is trying to, get FATF sanctions off its back.
Right.
It's really crucial for all these things to be clarified
Right.
and then
Do you
enforced
think
into
that
law.
National Action Plan does justice to these questions or not?
Yeah, I think there were good laws there, but the issue is one of implementation.
Right.
The implementation has remained so poor. But then I think we got sidetracked. There was this issue of numbers, and Chaudhary Sahab was
Do
saying.
you understand? We have twice talked on various other things.
Yeah.
Now it is water under the bridge.
Okay.
Let me go to Kakar Saab and ask him regarding the laws that might be needed. I mean, countries that evolve, that are born and then evolve, naturally keep facing new challenges, and then you are supposed to come up with the exact definition. It is not the job of the courts, it is of the parliament. Why is it that the parliament has not been able to come up with these laws, especially these definitions? And what are the problems that as a lawmaker you are facing right now in making new laws?
Thank you so much for bringing me into this discussion. I think so the broader understanding as far as of the militia is concerned is quite clear in this country. And constitution is also very explicit that you cannot constitute a militia. And the very word militia, when it is applied, it is primarily on a group which is constituted, which has a loose organizational structure with a relative sense of hierarchy, and which on the basis of that can order and initiate a violence against certain group.
Right.
So now that can be further explained and dissected also, that what sort of violence. Violence can be in individual, criminal groups, are they form or part of militia, or they can be specifically used for any political purposes. So when you talk of the political purposes, there has always been on the nationalist and religious ideas both,
Right.
that they have used militias as their armed, a part of their armed struggle.
Okay.
In Pakistan's context, it has been BLA, it has been TTP, it has been Ahrar, Daesh, so on and so forth. In the region, you can talk of Sri Lankans and Nepalese and Indians, different
No, but
militant
earlier,
groups.
with due respect, when you were talking about BLA, TTP, others, they are
They're the
not
classic
they are not
militias.
militant arms of any political group. They are actually terrorist organizations.
Primarily these are the militias who go for the armed struggles,
Okay.
and law of the state describes them and state them as a terrorist organization.
Right.
Why they've been designated as a terrorist organization? Because their primary role has become to terrorize the populace.
Right.
And they use violence as an instrument
Yeah.
to bring that terrorization.
Exactly. So you don't need a certificate from or
Now-
branding from the
now-
government
let
to
me- now-
identify that it is a
Now
terrorist
there is a
organization.
new situation where relatively I do not consider that JUI is applying the same instruments to topple the government.
Right.
If they go for the armed struggle, it would be straight away raising the arms against the state,
Right.
which is a constitutional crime,
Right.
and they can be dealt with force
Right.
to curb them. But at the same moment, what they are doing, that they are bringing up people in an organized manner as a political activity,
Yeah.
as mobilizing people under garb of politics.
And I'm glad that you cleared that contextual issue as well. But let us come back to the question that I was talking about.
The numbers.
We have to have narrow definitions of what constitutes violence, what constitutes a weapon,
It's all
and
already there.
militia.
It's already there.
No, not quite so. Where?
The Constitution is quite clear that you cannot constitute a militia, and militia has a classic national and international definitions,
Okay.
which has been agreed upon by all the international jurists. So there is no need to recreate the.
And weapon?
So weapon is also, I mean,
A baton is
starting
not a weapon.
from nuclear weapon to a simple
Baton?
arms
Okay.
or a danda, whatever you call it.
Okay.
which can harm a physically human being,
Okay.
right?
Right.
Now you cannot allow that there are licensed arms which you can carry with yourself, and there are unlicensed arms which you cannot carry with
No,
yourself.
but I understand what you are saying about the laws already or definitions being there. Let me qualify the same question through another example. Media is now talking about PEMRA and how it is actually ordering certain things. Now, we know and we have seen, especially in this court's case, right, that there were certain serious concerns about what media was doing wrong. People actually making broad accusations every day about state institutions, particularly judiciary as well. There, PEMRA had to actually move in and do its job. But if you could have actually narrowed down the actual categories of the crime that might be perpetrated, perhaps a blanket ban wouldn't have been needed.
I would reiterate again that there is no need to reinvent the wheel. The laws are there on the
So,
definition of
everything is
militia.
perfect now?
Well,
We
it's
don't
not
have to
about
make
being
new
perfect.
laws?
It's not about being perfect. It's about that the law does answer these situations.
Yeah.
So, as far as the present crisis is concerned, you do not need an additional legislation to handle the present crisis.
Okay,
The available legislation is there to handle this crisis.
right.
So
Let
if
me-
JUI or their activists go beyond certain limits, the laws are there, they can be handled and tackled with
Let me
that.
ask Chaudhry Sahab, your take on the laws. Are they sufficient or we need more laws?
Basically, if we are talking about the present situation, here we don't need to go for legislation. But as far as long-term strategy is concerned, there are so many areas where we need to make laws. And one thing which you have rightly pointed out about the courts, and those things which are happening in media regarding courts. There is law very clear about contempt of
Contempt,
court.
yeah, that
But as far as fair comment is concerned, it gives a freedom to anybody, to make a fair comment. Because people are, you have to establish that one is scandalizing the court,
Yeah.
are trying to diminish authority of the court.
Right.
So otherwise, if somebody makes, I don't think there was something very, very serious about it, because this is a political gimmick which is going on, and the media, they are making their own guess.
No,
everybody wants to.
Sir, but with due respect, you have to understand what is going on.
Yeah.
I mean, 15 years, there are terrorists that have been undermining your state institutions, all of them together. And we are actually working to remind people that the institutions are the institutions that are standing between terrorists and you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then the media all of a sudden actively starts undermining the image of the very same, especially I'm talking about Constitution and the courts. That becomes offensive, right?
No, yeah,
And
that is. Because.
So what you are saying is, I understand that the court perceives it as such, but when it comes to PEMRA, then the frame of reference changes from court to PEMRA. PEMRA needs more clear laws to implement
but
these issues.
PEMRA also needs a clear-headed vision to implement those laws, because what's going on. It is creating more fuss and more animosity in the minds of media when PEMRA is going after the anchor persons, who, and giving them circulars that you are not supposed to, and they are banning them from joining, going to another shows or
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Broad laws,
Yeah.
broad
because,
bans could have been
laws
avoided if we had the
actually,
right
I agree.
definition.
With Mr. Kakar, there is no problem with laws, but the basic problem is with the implementation, because everybody wants to implement laws according to his own whims.
Okay.
And when
Or
whims,
avoid the law.
Yeah, when whims play, then naturally everything gets away with.
Right. I'm told that we have run short of time, but you can conclude. Please go ahead.
Well, we've criticized JUI rightly, but I would also like to look at the broader context,
Right.
the way in which the government has, created the environment in which something like this became possible, the failures on governance, delivery, the unnecessarily daily rhetoric against the opposition, the one-sided political victimization. And after this thing is over, which I think it will be quicker rather than later,
that actually
I think it would be
necessitates-
important for the government to do some soul searching so that something like this doesn't happen in the future.
That necessitates a response from the treasury benches. Sir, if you want to do it very quickly, do it, and then after that-
I humbly disagree with this position. It's not about the government, it is about the desperation of the opposition and particularly JUI itself, who seems to was becoming irrelevant to
Right.
current political arrangement. So
and
that
somehow they are not
want
relevant, right?
back, yes, they want at least to have that relevance back.
Right. On that note, I'm told that we have to conclude the program. Senator Anwarul Haq Kakar Sahab, thank you very much for your time. Arif Chaudhry Sahab, thank you very much. Always great. It is great that you are here. Dr. Niaz Mirza, thank you very much for your time as well. Viewers, you have listened to our participants. This discussion, of course, will continue even after Maulana has arrived and gone. There are certain issues regarding lawmaking in this country that need immediate attention. Whether my panelists agree or not, the fact is that for 1 year, we haven't been able to make the kind of laws that were needed from day to day. And that actually might be because of the very same opposition that keeps on complaining about government's inactivity. So let us hope in coming days we see more laws, clarity of thought, and then unity of purpose as well, because this country needs to go ahead, move ahead. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.